Picture this, a small duplex in Pennsylvania. On one side, a husband and wife raising their 4 daughters. On the other side, grandparents. Watchful, prayerful, part of the rhythm of daily life. It should have been safe. It should have been ordinary. But behind those walls, something was waiting. It whispered in the night, slammed cupboards, filled the air with the stench of sulfur, and left bruises on the living. For over a decade, this family wasn't simply haunted. They were hunted. And today we open the door on the Smurl haunting. Hello again, my spooky friends, and welcome back to another episode of Tell Me a Scary Story. I'm Heather, and today we're stepping into one of the most infamous Warren cases of alleged demonic activity in modern American history. Now, this isn't a story about flickering light bulbs or the occasional creak of old floorboards. No. This is a story of relentless torment. It's a story of faith tested to its breaking point. A story where even priests and demonologists were left shaken. And yes, it's the real-life case that inspired the newest film, The Conjuring: Last Rites. So turn down those lights, pull the blanket a little closer, and maybe keep a prayer handy. Because this story has terrified families, baffled skeptics, and left even the faithful unsettled. This is the Smurl haunting. In 1974, Jack and Janet Smurl moved into a new home, a modest duplex at 328 Chase Street in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. The arrangement seemed perfect. On one side of the home, Jack and Janet would raise their 4 daughters, Dawn, Heather, not me, and the twins, Karen and Shannon. On the other side, sharing the duplex wall, were Jack's parents, John and Mary Smurl. A multi-generational home, close-knit, built on family and faith. Now, at first glance, it was nothing unusual. The home was older, yes, but sturdy. West Pittston was a quiet, working-class town. Not the kind of place you'd expect to become ground zero for one of the most disturbing hauntings in American history. But almost immediately, the house seemed determined to show them it was no ordinary home. Water stains seeped through freshly painted walls, as if the house itself was bleeding. Paint peeled no matter how many times they reapplied it. Electrical appliances sparked and caught fire despite being unplugged. Plumbing burst or failed constantly, flooding rooms for no clear reason. And then came the stench. Janet described it as the smell of rotting flesh, heavy and choking, filling the air with no source and vanishing seconds later. Cold spots appeared in warm rooms, chilling the family in midsummer, and shadowy figures began drifting across the walls, slipping just out of sight whenever they turned their heads. It was enough to unsettle anyone, but for the Smurls, this was only the beginning. By the early 1980s, the strangeness had escalated into outright terror. Furniture no longer simply shifted. It slammed violently across rooms. Beds rattled so hard that they threatened to throw the children from their mattresses. Heavy dressers moved as if pushed by unseen hands. There was one instance that the family dog was lifted and hurled against a wall, yelping in pain. and Janet herself reported being pulled from her bed, slapped across the face, and scratched by invisible claws. Jack said he had been bitten deep enough to leave marks, and both described terrifying episodes of being pinned to their beds, unable to breathe, as something pressed down on their chests. And then, the most disturbing of all, what the family called intimate torment. Jack confided that something would climb onto him at night, leaving him powerless. Janet too described encounters of a deeply personal nature, violations that left them both shaken and humiliated. This just wasn't a haunting anymore. This was a war of attrition, stripping away not only their safety, but their dignity. Now, I can't really divulge much more than what I just said about their encounters with this entity. Just know that the words incubus and succubus were put out there, and it was extremely graphic in so much that I can't discuss what happened here on Spotify or any platforms really. But what they went through was horrendous. This is probably why this is one of the most awful cases I have ever heard of. Now, what made this case harder to dismiss was that it wasn't just Jack and Janet. On the other side of the duplex, Jack's parents, John and Mary, were enduring their own horrors. They heard the same pounding on the walls. They smelled the sulfur seeping through their rooms, cupboards slamming open in their kitchen, overhead lights flickering violently, and furniture rattled without warning. They turned to their faith, praying constantly, rosaries, sprinkling holy water, but their prayers felt swallowed by the house, like the activity mocked them. For John and Mary, devout Catholics in their later years, this was devastating. Their faith had carried them through life's struggles. But in that home, it felt as though heaven was silent. Soon it wasn't only the family inside who spoke of strange things. Neighbors on Chase Street began reporting unexplainable events. Some heard blood-curdling screams and moans coming from the Smurl home when no one was inside. Others swore they saw shadowy figures behind curtains of darkened rooms. Whispers spread quickly through the neighborhood. The house at 328 Chase Street developed a reputation. Some neighbors pitied the family, convinced they were victims of something evil. Others muttered about hysteria, lies, and attention-seeking. But whether people believed or not, everyone agreed on one thing. Something was wrong inside that house. Now, by 1986, after more than a decade of torment, the Smurls were desperate. At this point, they have gone to the church, and the church just basically turned them away, said they couldn't help them. So, by this point, they reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famous demonologists who have investigated the Amityville Horror House, the Enfield Poltergeist, and countless other cases. When Lorraine entered the home, she later claimed she saw a powerful, inhuman presence, looming and oppressive. Ed reported being physically attacked during their investigation, scratches gouged across his chest. The Warrens concluded that the Smurl home was infested by multiple entities, at least 4 distinct forces. One was violent, another manipulative, one mocking and taunting, and one purely demonic. This was no ordinary haunting. Working with the Warrens was Father McKenna, a Catholic priest who agreed to attempt exorcisms at the home. He performed several rites, and for short stretches the family experienced peace. But every time the silence broke. And when it did, the activity returned with greater ferocity, as if the entity fed on the attempts to banish it. Janet later said it felt like the house was laughing at their faith. For years, the local diocese refused to formally acknowledge the haunting. Father McKenna continued to try, but he was effectively fighting alone, without the full authority or support of the church behind him. By the mid-1980s, the case was no longer private. Reporters camped outside the duplex, crowds gathered on Chase Street, some praying, some jeering, some just hoping for a glimpse of the supernatural. By this time, the Smurls found themselves thrusted into unwanted spotlight. In 1986, journalist Robert Curran, working with the Smurls and the Warrens, published The Haunted, One Family's Nightmare. The book gave the public a chilling look inside the torment. Critics suggested possible medical explanations: epilepsy, hallucinations, or hysteria. Others accused the family of fabricating the whole story for profit. But believers point out the consistency of the testimonies, not just from Jack and Janet, but from John and Mary, from neighbors, and even from the investigators. The case remained fiercely debated, but impossible to ignore. By 1987, the Smurls were unraveling. The children lived in constant fear. Jack and Janet were exhausted and humiliated. And John and Mary, once the family's pillars of faith, confessed that the haunting had shaken their religious convictions to their core. After 12 years of torment, the family could make it no longer. In 1989, they fled the duplex on Chase Street. But the haunting wasn't finished with them. The Smurls left hoping that this would change everything. But unfortunately, it didn't. Jack reported that the presence followed them, manifesting at least one unwanted encounter in the new home. This only fueled more fear that no matter what, no matter where or who, this was going to follow them. But thankfully, around this time, their story caught notice. Since The Haunted had been published, spreading their story far beyond Pennsylvania, priests who read the book began urging the church to respond more forcefully. Under pressure, the diocese finally acknowledged the case. A formal church-sanctioned exorcism was performed. And this time, it worked. The Smurls later said they were finally free after 12 long years of torment. The family could live in peace. Can you imagine? Over a decade of horrific torment. That's the kind of thing that scars you for life. Now flash forward decades later, Hollywood has resurrected the case. The Conjuring Last Rites, which just came out, draws heavily from the Smurl haunting, with early reports suggesting the film doesn't shy away from the darkest aspects, the intimate torments, the despair, and the repeated failures of exorcisms before the church's final intervention. Fans are buzzing with both excitement and dread. Religious groups warn against watching it, saying the story itself invites darkness. But whether you see it as truth or fiction, one fact remains. Nearly 50 years later, the Smurls' nightmare still terrifies us. Now, I myself have yet to see the movie, which I'm excited to see, I'm probably going to see it this weekend, but on the other hand, I'm apprehensive. Not because I'm fearful of going and watching it. There's even some theaters handing out holy water. Like priests are there, like blessing people. It's the fact that they're going to Hollywood it up. They're going to add things in to tie in all the other stories, because this is the last movie of the Conjuring franchise. Because in this case, the truth is much more terrifying than fiction. And I highly suggest, if you are interested in it, to read up on this case, because there are many things that I could not talk about here. How graphic they were, how horrifying they were. So, yeah, if you're going to watch the movie, I highly suggest that you learn about this case in full so that you can understand what's going on, because it's awful. And the scary thing is, it really happened. And I believe that it happened. I believe the Smurls. I believe the Warrens that were involved in this. There are things in the case I didn't even tell you about, like when they were investigating that chairs were being thrown. People were being injured. This is probably one, if not the most terrifying case that the Warrens ever were a part of. And the fact that it was all real is scary. Because, again, this family just went into this home, just for a peaceful place to live. Makes you wonder what really goes on behind closed doors. What can happen behind closed doors? And sadly, this is where I end this episode. If you have your own scary stories, I'd love to share them for you. I now have the capabilities of interview as well. So if that's something that you're wanting to do, if you want to tell your own story with me, we can do that. So just email me at tellmeascarystorypodcast@gmail.com or reach out to me on TikTok. I'm there quite often as well. I'm also doing collabs. And speaking of, I have my very first collaboration about to come out Friday the 19th, and it's a two-parter. Part 1 will be on Retraced Echoes here on Spotify and also on YouTube. Part 2 will be on mine here on Spotify and on YouTube, and this is actually a videoed podcast, so it's kind of nerve-wracking but exciting at the same time. But you will need to watch or listen to part 1, again on Retraced Echoes, and then we'll listen to mine, or none of it will make any sense. So you're going to have to listen to both. And I highly suggest you support Retraced Echoes. They have amazing content. Again, this is my first collaboration, but not the only one. More is coming. So stay tuned. Reflecting on this story again, I can't help but wonder, when something spends 12 years inside your walls, watching you sleep, laughing at your prayers, does it ever really leave? Or is it still out there, waiting for another family, another house, another open door? Thank you for listening to this podcast. Keep your lights on, and remember, evil doesn't knock before it enters. Oh, and stay spooky.